I've always had a pretty interesting relationship with the Five Nights at Freddy's series. As a kid, I remember being pretty into Five Nights at Freddy's. I remember watching all of the game theories and all of Markiplier's playthroughs of really the first 3 or 4 games, up until I started doing books and sister locations and more books and VR games and graphic novels and AR games and mini book series and just a lot of books. And I just remember I kind of got lost, and then they introduced like fucking Statue of Liberty Chica, and at that point I was just clocked out completely. But I definitely was a fan of the series all the way back in 2015 when the Five Nights at Freddy's movie was very first announced. And I remember being a 10-year-old boy just so excited for this movie, and I waited and waited and waited to the point where I genuinely never believed this movie would happen. It got tossed in between studios and directors and scripts, and so many different actors were involved and not involved, and so many things changed about this movie that I just never thought it was going to happen. And in between now and that initial excitement point for me, I can't lie, I really fell out of love with this game series. I have not thought about Five Nights at Freddy's really that much in the last probably 5 years of my life, but there was this feeling I had on the drive over to go see this movie. It was an excitement, a weird feeling of nostalgia that was so strong and overwhelming. And then I finally got to watch the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, and it hurt even more that when 10 years later, so much waiting, when I finally watched it, I didn't love it. I wanted to, I tried, I really tried, I wanted to love this movie, but I didn't. And I want to talk about it because the Five Nights at Freddy's movie does not work. It doesn't work for me, and it doesn't seem to be working for a lot of people, and I really just want to talk about that because there's a lot of good here and there's quite a bit of bad, so I just want to talk about all of it. But first of all, spoiler warning for not only the movie but also probably the rest of the Five Nights at Freddy's lore, which also, disclaimer, I probably will be getting the game lore wrong, so please do let me know in the comments below, politely correct me. I don't know the game lore that well. Anyway, let's get right into the video. I think a big issue that I and a lot of people had going in was expectations. The trailer showed us a completely different movie in my opinion. The trailers showed us this horror mystery, while this was a lot more of a comedy at times, and while there was definitely a mystery, it was a lot more straightforward than I was expecting. And while that's not bad necessarily, it did take me a minute in the theater to go, oh okay, this isn't really a horror movie, and I'm not getting scared by anything other than this ridiculous balloon boy thing. Sorry. Another unexpected thing for me was just how much I really liked some of the characters in this movie, because as far as I know, in the first 3 games you play as a pretty much unnamed security guard, and in the way they were able to adapt that to make Mike such a likable and relatable character was pretty cool and honestly kind of surprising. I think Piper Rubio was great as Abby, and she really sold her character as this kid who has all of these imaginary friends and doesn't really feel like she belongs in the real world. I loved the chemistry between the two of them as well. While the relationship and its arc in this movie was completely predictable, that doesn't mean it didn't work for me, because it really did, and there were some kind of emotional parts between these two. I think the movie also handled the whole Five Nights part pretty well. I don't think I'm alone in saying quite a few people didn't think we would actually see 5 different nights in this movie. You know, pacing wise, I don't know how that's really gonna work, but we did, and it did work surprisingly. As well, they used that multiple nights subject to tie that in with the dreams in this movie, which once again I surprisingly didn't hate. I'm not usually a big fan of repeated dreams and showing the same flashback over and over again, and while it does get repetitive even in this movie, I genuinely do think they kept it interesting throughout, and they did some different things with dreams that a lot of movies don't do. And while we're talking about positives, I think I should mention the animatronics themselves. And while this is where I do start to come into issues with the movie, what I don't have an issue with is just how amazing they look. I think the animatronics look great in this movie, and they worked really well for both seemingly being these embodiments of those ghost kids and being really cute and cuddly, and then also kind of eerie and terrifying. Like, they never got extremely scary in the movie, but they did give off that kind of weird vibe that you would get from old Chuck E. Cheese recordings and videos of those animatronics, and that's really cool to me, and that's something I wish they kind of tied back to more. But I think even the bits they did do it was really good with the weird stiff movements they would have. I loved it a lot. And for a movie that I'm saying doesn't really work, I'm being pretty positive here, because yeah, no matter what I'm going to get into, this movie does deserve to be celebrated. The fans waited 10 years for this movie, and it wasn't awful. They got all of this fan service they wanted, and it kind of worked. They got a $130 million opening weekend. The movie made enough to fund the next 6 Five Nights at Freddy's movies if they wanted to, and it was one of Blumhouse's biggest success stories ever. The FNAF fans showed up for this movie, and the FNAF fans should be proud of themselves, and they should love this movie. Hell, I love this movie for what it is, but I also don't. I love parts of it. And I do want to get into the negatives, but I hope everyone listens and hears me out on this, because I promise I am not a hater. I wanted to love this thing. I wanted to enjoy it for that younger version of me. But I can't ignore certain parts of this movie that really do bug me. I think the first act is extremely solid, and if the movie was able to keep up like that, then this would be a very different video, but sadly it couldn't. I think the movie shoots itself in the foot quite a few times in the second act, and that really stops them from sticking the landing and getting that satisfying ending in the third. I think for me, things get dicey once we're really introduced to the animatronics. I like them a lot. I really like that they all seem to have different personalities, and I also do understand that they were never meant to be scary and all, but they weren't ever, and that's kind of a shame. At no point was I ever afraid of them, and I wish I was. There's the scene where the babysitter and her friends break into Freddy's, and I don't love any of it. I kind of enjoy getting to see the kills and seeing the animatronics be kind of horror icons, which I was hoping they would be, but I don't love a lot of the story happening here. I kind of do enjoy the story with the ant, but then again, we don't really get a real resolution for that outside of Golden Freddy maybe potentially killing her. I don't know. I wanted to like that plotline more, and I do like parts of it. There are good things there between Mike and the ant, and between Abby and, you know, the teacher and all that, but it just didn't really work for me. And I also didn't love the character of Vanessa in this movie, who I do believe is interpreted from one of the later games, or multiple of them maybe, but from what I understand was changed quite a bit to not be the villain, but to be the daughter of the bad guy, you know, Steve Raglan, William Afton, whatever you want to call him. From the very beginning, I didn't really trust her though, and that wasn't helped by all of the strange dialogue she was given, and also a weird performance to say the least from the actress. I think her character has the weakest story throughout too, and I think everything about how she went out in that third act was pretty unsatisfying for me. And I think that really comes down to how disappointed I was in general with everything in that William Afton Springtrap encounter at the end. I think that's where the movie really lost me and a lot of other people too, because I don't even know what's happening here. This is gonna make me sound stupid to the FNAF fans, so please bear with me, explain in the comments what I get wrong. But I felt like the ghost kids seemed to be scared of the yellow rabbit based off how Abby talked about it and how the kids were drawing him in the dirt while talking about Mike's brother's kidnapper. And I thought that was really cool. I thought that was building to this, you know, scary antagonist, the yellow rabbit. And I was really hoping we'd get like flashbacks or something, but even that opening scene in the 8-bit, you know, style, even that was a little eerie, because I really like the idea of this yellow rabbit who uses this like joyful thing and takes it from them. But in the movie, I don't really get what's happening here, because they don't seem to like him, but then they're mind controlled by him to trust him. And like, how does he do that? I get the drawings, but why? Also, why was he there in the first place? Why does Afton kill kids in this movie at all? He has no motive. And why inside of his own restaurant? Why was he in the woods exactly where Mike was like 20 years ago? How did he get away with it? Why did he change his name, but he lives in the same town where the restaurant is, so he looks the exact same? Has everyone forgotten what he looks like? I don't know. And why would they waste such an amazing actor like Matthew Lillard on genuinely like 3 scenes? That had to be the most disappointing part for me. I wanted so much William Afton, and we just didn't get any William Afton. Just a lot of this ending doesn't work for me, and don't even get me started on Golden Freddy, who comes out of literally nowhere. I genuinely thought the blonde kid was supposed to be Freddy up until he revealed himself, which makes no sense. Like, where was that Golden Freddy suit at in the restaurant? Is the Golden Freddy suit even real? Because they don't mention it again once she gets to the restaurant, so maybe it's a ghost hallucination thing. I don't know. And honestly, maybe there's answers here. Maybe I just haven't seen enough. Maybe I don't know enough. These are just currently my thoughts after seeing the movie only one time, to be fair, but that whole third act just doesn't seem to work, and it doesn't seem to come together cleanly. And then, to make it even worse, the movie just kind of ends with us still having so many questions. Like, sure, I was satisfied with the growth between Mike and Abby, and that's amazing, but everything else feels unresolved, and that just left a sour taste in my mouth walking out of the movie. Even Vanessa being the daughter of the killer, William Springtrap Afton, that should be huge, but they kind of just glance over it and ignore the fact that maybe she's been helping him all this time do these murders for years and years. And there are just so many questions here and so many things we could theorize on, and I think I know why. It all comes back back to Scott Cawthon, the creator of Five Nights at Freddy's, who was very, very involved in the making of this movie. He was the reason why it took so long, why it went through so many scripts, and honestly, I don't blame him, as he should be very involved. This is huge, and his thing. Let him be involved. He also really knows the fan base from what I've seen as an outsider looking in. He is very involved with the fans and pretty in tune with what they want, and I think that shows with this movie. It was made to satisfy those fans in particular, and while that's great and fun, and I love that for them, that's why this movie doesn't work. You can't call it a finished film with a full story if it takes 10 years of knowledge for you to just maybe be able to guess at some of the less filled in plot points, because it's gotten to the point where I've asked multiple of my friends who understand this story, and they've all given me different answers on why different things are happening in the third act, to the point where it's just like I could probably make up what I want and I'm just as correct as they are. And that, in my opinion, that is a failure in the making of the movie. And while it's not terrible, it does hurt the movie for the casual enjoyer like me, and especially for critics who are destroying this thing, which is such a shame because there's so much heart in here, because this was made out of love, and that love seemed to be so strong in the making, it seems to have blinded the filmmakers a little. The director Emma Tammy did very well in my opinion, especially for this being her big kind of debut into the spotlight. She did really well, and there's a lot of really well shot scenes, but I think there was just something that doesn't work here. And whether it was Scott Cawthon getting involved and telling them this is what the fans will love, and obviously it was, it has a 90% audience score, Scott Cawthon knows his fan base, it just doesn't work as well as it could. And I'm hoping in the sequel, which I have to assume they will be getting, that maybe we can lean back into the horror a little. You know, you have a first movie now, you have a foundation, maybe separate yourselves just a little bit from the games and give us a full satisfying story tying in everything from the first movie, and then you can have your conclusion to the trilogy and have that one tie back into the games. But just give us the ending for this one first, please. But either way, I will be watching, and hopefully I enjoy the next one. I did have fun with this one. I hope you did too, because this is a fun movie. Give it a chance. Don't let the 20% critics score scare you away. I'm gonna be very interested to see if people share any of the same sentiments I do though. I'm giving Five Nights at Freddy's a pretty decent 56%. If you're a fan, go watch it. You'll probably love it. And if you're not, bring one of your FNAF fan friends. I know we all have one, and have them explain it to you. You'll probably still have a good time. Anyway, I know I've been gone for a while. Spider-Man Far From Home review is coming on Sunday. Alright, it got blocked quite a few times, and I've had a headache trying to get it worked out. But I'm back. Get ready for that one and so many other videos coming soon. Let me know what other movies and shows you want me to cover. And yeah, that's about it. Bye.